So basically what I'm going to talk about now is how you scale a profitable Amazon campaign. So, if you run a PPC campaign with a couple of keywords, it's relatively easy. The problem is as you scale up, it becomes complicated to manage. So just a little bit more about me and about Trendle. So I've been selling on Amazon since 2010. I run a 7-figure Amazon business. That was the initial thing, how we got started. We sell in 8 countries. At the time I was living in China, that's how I got involved. So I lived there for 4 years. Spent over $300,000 US on PPC over the years. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, we founded Trendle with my business partner. So Trendle Analytics is an all-encompassing software which has 8 main applications. So a lot of the softwares out there will do 1 or 2 of the main features you require. We have developed all 8 that we think are critical, and they came out of the needs that we developed as we grew our company. The reason we believe it's a better approach is that we can then cross-combine some of your data. So in a very simple example, with the PPC automation, we can use your keyword rankings. Well, we can't do that quite yet, but one of the things we're working on is to be able to adjust your PPC performance based on your keyword rankings. Okay, but that's for later. So just again, the same question, who runs sponsored product campaigns here? Who feels they're not profitable enough? I'm assuming most of you will agree with both questions. And one of the tips I always give is always think about the consumer pathway. Before you even get onto the ads, always think about the consumer pathway and how your product compares to the competition. If you're not spending the time to do that before you start, you're going to be wasting money. And ultimately, the money you waste is what's going to affect the profitability of your business. So what affects the ads? So your ads, they don't work in isolation. And so when you're spending money on PPC alone, it's no guarantee that your ads will be successful. There is a certain amount of things you need to make sure you cover before you even consider the ads. So the obvious things like your title, your listing, the performance, the reviews, the price, the images, and the competition. And as an example here, we've got 4 listings. So how many of you here would choose to buy listing 1, the guy pressed in the left corner? Can you put your hands up? How many would choose listing 2? How many would choose listing 3? No one? And how many would choose listing 4? Okay, so everyone has a different perception. Why is that? Some of you are more affected by the price, and then would, for example, pick listing 3. Some of you are more affected by the reviews, would pick listing 4. Some of you might go for more premium product and would go for listing 2. And then some of you might try listing 1 because it has a voucher and they feel they're saving something. So these are different consumer perceptions which will affect how they interact with your ads. So it's important that you think about these things before you start your ads. Okay? Then these things have a dual impact. They influence both how your product ranks organically, but also they influence how a consumer sees your product and how he behaves. And ultimately, that's what will affect whether or not they choose to buy your product. So it's important to think about these things before you even start. So what does success look like on an Amazon campaign? There's a couple of critical metrics you need to focus on. Everything on Amazon, for those who already sell on Amazon, you'll know, is driven by data. And so you need to know these data points. So the obvious first starting point is your ACOS. Your ACOS is your Amazon cost of sale, for those who don't know. Effectively, it's equivalent to your margin. And what I mean by that is, how do you calculate it? If you take your margin, you have your profit. So how do you decide that? You have the price. So in this example, $15.99. You remove your VAT, that's sales taxes in the UK, for those who don't know. Your referral fee, your FBA fee, cost of goods. You get a profit of $3.38, so a 21.1% margin. So your ACOS, if your ACOS is above 21.1%, what that means is you're losing money. You're giving Amazon more than what they're giving you back when you make a sale. And that's what the ACOS is. And then if you're underneath it, effectively, you're telling Amazon's giving you like $3.38 and you're giving them $3 back. That's a good exchange. You can do that all day. Because ultimately, what you're going to be wanting to do is as you get the more sales from the ads, that will help your organic ranking. If your organic ranking improves, you'll rank higher up on Amazon, and that's where you'll make your money and the full 20% margin, or 21.1% margin. So it's very important to know your strategies. Often we suggest to be more aggressive when you start out. So when you initially launch, obviously people don't know you. You want to be more aggressive with your bid, and then you can start reducing that and looking to improve your ACOS after that. So the next slide is know what your conversion rate, and the reason you want to know your conversion rate, this is how you'll calculate when you start what kind of bid you want to be using. So how you get that, if you go report business reports in the by ASIN, you'll see you have sessions, unit sessions, and total order items. So the pure actual conversion rate is calculated by taking the orders divided by the number of sessions, multiplied by 100, in this case 85.86%, which is obviously very high, but this is what you can get with Amazon if you run it properly. And then the unit session percentage is, if you can't be bothered to calculate it, this is a data point that Amazon gives you. It's more or less the same thing. The difference is obviously that's if people buy more than one unit in an order, that's where it will come up a little bit higher because that's what happens there. Then when we look at the third metric is then how do you use these data points to calculate your max cost per click? So very simply, we come back to our example, you have a price of $15.99. If your margin is 338, so 21%, and your conversion rate is 25%, you need 4 clicks to get an order. Okay, so how do you calculate if your average cost per click to have a 21% ACOS is 338 multiplied by 25% equals you 84%. Sorry, this is very technical, but it's just for people who wouldn't know about this. And if anyone has any questions, please, you know.
The CPCs is very high.
Sorry, go on, sorry. Sorry?
The CPC is very high, but 21% normally is more.
So 21% is the margin.
Sorry?
21.1% is the margin.
I guess, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
No, 25.
So 20%, that's the conversion rate. So it depends on the product. So depending on what product you're selling, I mean the product I showed you, but the screenshots here with 88% conversion, that's actually a real product that we sell, that I sold. So if it's a very specific product, I won't tell you exactly what it is, but it's like a screw. It's something where there's no kind of perceived added value, and it's something where, you know, if you rank #1 in Amazon for years, you're just going to stay there, no one can move you, and that's where you get such high conversion rates. It's not like kind of an innovative product, so I can't even speak English anymore.
You don't understand.
Yeah, I know.
No problem.
No, but it's not like a new product that you have to kind of explain to the customer. It's something like someone looks for a screw, he goes on Amazon, first guy, he clicks on it, he buys it. So that's why you get such a high conversion rate. But anyway, sorry, you had a question or not?
Yeah, but you probably will show it. Is your PPC campaign manager also then showing the successions? Like it's calculating the highest CPC, showing you that? Be careful that your highest CPC after calculating all your costs.
So this is where the automatic campaigns will come in, and we'll talk about that later. Ultimately, it calculates it because you set your metrics. So we'll talk about it later and why what we do exactly, if you don't mind, sorry. So again, the 3 key points: set your target ACOS, what's your conversion rate, and what's your max bid. And that, once you know that, I mean, the key thing is if you don't know these points, you shouldn't be advertising basically. So, yeah.
We've had some sellers who take different strategies and say, I'm very unconcerned about my ACOS because that drives my organic ranking. And they go to us, you don't, in your produce, and you don't factor that in, you look at advertising sales and say that ACOS should be profitable in the context of just the advertising sales.
So that's a different point. So what I'm just trying to explain is how you would scale it and the basic metrics behind. Then what you've said, it becomes a strategy. So you might have a product that you would accept a loss for the first 6 months, the first 1,000 units, whatever your decision is, and then you'll rein it in after. Or you'll let it run unprofitably in terms of the ads because you know you're getting a lot of organic sales in the background. So that then becomes a strategy question mark rather than a data element. So you're completely right, and we've done that. I've seen it. It's perfectly viable as a business model, but then it becomes a strategy call. Does that make sense?
But you don't look at that. That's not like your top line metric where you say, rather than looking at advertising sales, I use an adjusted ACOS. I look at almost
organic compared to of course. And so that's definitely something which, one of the advantages that I was saying earlier about our platform software is because we have the 8 different applications, we can then use these different data points that you would get from different areas to actually set as metrics in your automatic campaign. So, like I said before, the keyword based on your ranking, one of the things we're working on is how you can then automatically adjust your ad campaign. The same thing would occur for your organic sales. One of the things need to double check if we've got it launched yet or if it's coming out soon, but I know it's very close. It's one of the things we've been pushing is precisely that, because in some case scenarios you want to make a loss on your ads because you're making a lot more money elsewhere. So again, that's what, if it's not available right now, it's going to be available very soon. But so then how do you set up your campaigns? This is the more our element and our suggestions. You hear a lot of people and a lot of online things which say to you, launch an automatic campaign, then move the keywords to broad, to phrase, to exact match. And I really would never do that. We've done a little bit. I've done a little bit of automatic campaigns, I think 3 or 4 years ago when it was first launched, and it's garbage. I would never touch that. The reason I wouldn't do it is Amazon's a keyword-based search engine. So everything functions based on the keywords you use, okay? So, and the reason why I was explaining what I was explaining earlier, it doesn't work in isolation. So how can you have a good listing without the keywords? And so if you have the keywords which are relevant, why would you then go and use software to discover keywords which you're paying when you can download files of keywords? And we'll get onto that in a few seconds. But the example I give is, if you do an automatic campaign for like a toilet brush, Amazon will rank you for toilets, for the individual word toilet and the individual word brush. That means your ad will show up for a toilet seat, toilet paper, a hairbrush, which have no relevance. And what the problem with doing that is then if you use an automatic software like ours or someone else's, you're setting metrics. So you're saying 4 clicks, no orders, get rid of it. 10 clicks, no orders, get rid of it. ACOS below, above this point, no orders. But you have spent that money on that amount of clicks to discover that a word that you already knew had no relevance, was irrelevant. So if you've got loads of money to burn, by all means do it. But what we suggest is to turn it around the other way. As I said, how do you expect to perform well on a keyword-based search engine if you don't know your keywords? And so what we suggest is to flip it around and do the other way. You start by doing a manual campaign, an automatic, manual exact campaign, sorry. And the way you do that is, I don't know how many of you here have heard about what reverse ASIN is? Reverse ASIN. So there's a few, can you put your hands up, just you two? Yep. Basically what reverse ASIN is, there's a few companies out there who do it. There's a few providers who provide it for free where it's not bad, but it's not great. If you Google it, you'll find it very easy. There's a few, you pay $5 to $10. You literally say, okay, you sell this product, I want to compete with you. I will take your ASIN, I'll put it in a software, and I'll find out every single keyword that you rank on. So if I know every single keyword you rank on, and you can only rank on those keywords by making sales on those keywords, why would I want to go and discover other keywords using an automatic thing which will find me a load of junk? What we do, and what we suggest doing, is you take that file of keywords and you add it into an exact match campaign. And so you bid on the keywords that your rival is already ranking on, that you know your rival is already converting on. Does that make sense? Or?
Yes, but the rivals maybe have different product features. So maybe they convert for a lot of other things than my own product converts.
So of course, but then if you do an automatic, it's the same thing. If you do an automatic campaign on a word which is irrelevant,
Yes, okay.
Do you see what I mean? Like, of course, this whole strategy rests on you doing working on a product which is actually the same. You know, but you wouldn't, when you're writing your listing, because as I said, why I started talking about ads don't work in isolation is this data you should have when you start. When you're writing your Amazon listing, you should have that data when you start. And so if you don't have it, you're running ads with like an inferior listing to your rivals. Does that make sense? Because if they have those keywords, because Germany is relatively protected at the moment as a market, but once the big American sellers start coming over more and more, they're using all these things today. And so if you're not up to speed with what they're doing, they're going to overtake you pretty quickly. So did you have a question?
Yeah. Is your tool monitoring reverse ASINs? So if you put in your 10 top competitors and then you see, oh, look, they are making sales on that keyword, I need to implement it as well. Because some way you need to look it up all the time, right? To see if they have some new guidelines. We don't do any reverse ASINs. The reason for that is that we found that you have a few of our rivals do it, but most of them
most of the software companies who do it, they give it away for free. But what you're getting is a very average product. And again, if you look up online on Google, I mean, I can tell you who I use if you want. I use a company called Keyword Inspector, you may have heard of. They were one of the first to do it. I have no links to them, so I'm not promoting them. And the advantage of what they do is they do it to a far higher level. So you're getting a lot more keywords in there. So if you do some of these free services, you'll get maybe 50, 60, 100 keywords. You're not getting the 2,000. Because what I'm talking about is when you're paying for this, and you're talking about $5, $10, and it's not very expensive, you're getting 2,000 keywords which are highly relevant. Anyway, so coming back to this, so what we suggest to do is you start with that exact match, and you run it like that. And the reason to do it is for quite a low cost, you get rid of the kind of the garbage and the wasted clicks, if that makes sense. And ultimately, that's what's going to affect your profitability of your product. Because if you're wasting money on ads, then you're losing. It's money you have to make somewhere else to be profitable. So if I just move on so quickly, who is overwhelmed by the process of running ads on Amazon and the amount of data? Is there anyone here who finds it like overwhelming? Yeah. Okay.
And the implementation.
So what do you mean by the implementation?
I think I don't understand it properly. That we have many variants, and then setting. I should have like an ad set of each individual variant because each variant has different characteristics.
So what do you mean by an ad sale?
I mean, so an ad set. So if I should basically go down to the variant level, and then I have to copy the campaigns for each individual variant. I think I don't do it properly. I think I lack the experience to know how you can efficiently set up campaigns. And I've only been doing it directly in Seller Central, so far not using the tool. And it seems like I'm doing the same thing 20 times over for each variant, as opposed to I'd like to go copy that campaign structure from that variant to that variant. So
are you talking in terms of campaign structure, are you talking about the bid size, or are you talking about adding the actual physical adding of the keywords in?
More the adding of the keywords, so it has to be set up, and then each variant is going to perform differently. So I'm going to maybe have like a starting strategy that every variant within that is part, and then they have different features. It's fashion in one screen and one's red.
So we'll get on to, I think that this is where I think, if I've understood the question correctly, I think this is where the automation comes in and the sets of rules. And this is why I was asked the question. I talked a lot about this stuff before to kind of set the important things you need to think about. So the solution to all of this is running software. And the way these softwares work is you set a certain amount of parameters or rules, which then the software goes and implements automatically on your behalf, because when you're running 5, 6, 7,000 keywords in 8 countries in 5 languages, you can't do it manually, okay? And so this is where our ads automation platform comes in, and there's plenty of others around, as I'm sure you're all aware. It allows you in a few minutes to create a campaign from scratch with exactly what parameters you want. So you can adjust bids based on your ACOS target, you can promote search terms to keywords, you can move them around to different campaigns, you can add them as negative, and all of this, and you can fully automate your search term isolation. So one of the things to say is, what I just mentioned about only doing exact matches and sometimes phrases from there, our software allows you to also do automatic campaigns. We don't suggest it, we don't encourage it, but you can use our software to run automatic campaigns if that's what you want to do. So this is just a little video just to show how quickly it is to do this. Basically, what you choose your keyword, what's the say. I'm just going to skip this video, actually, it's not that good. So one of the important things is follow the data. So as a human being, you have more value than the computer. And so you should, as an individual, focus on the minority of keywords which convert really highly, and then let the software in the background run the rest of it, the mass of it. So you'll probably have, if you have a successful campaign, you'll probably have 10 to 20 or 30 keywords which really drive a lot of sales and are really profitable. Those keywords, you should be making sure they're placed in the right place in the listing. You should be making A/B testing. So for example, if you put the first keyword in the testing or the second one, which converts better? Things like that. And that's what will take you as a human time, but that's what will make you really accelerate your sales. However, in terms of the rest, the maths, which still produces a lot of sales for you, you should let the software run it for you, okay? And so I'm just going to now just show you a quick example. So we have, I think there's 5 or 6 in the software preset types of campaigns. And There's one for automatic campaigns, one for broad ones if that's what you want. But just to give you an example of very simple what this would work, we always suggest only putting one SKU in a campaign. If you have a variation that is very close, then you can put multiple SKUs. But generally speaking, you shouldn't be mixing different products. I've seen people do that, and it's completely crazy. So in this example, we'll have a default bid of 73 cents, a budget of 15 euros. Again, these are all of the numbers here you can change depending on what your requirements are. And then you set some rules. So for example, if you have 0 clicks after 5 days, you increase your bid by 0.1. So the software will just do it for you. And then you set a max bid, because obviously you don't want to keep increasing it, until the infinite. Same, if there's no orders, 5 clicks, you decrease it, minimum bid 0.33. Then if there's no orders after 10 clicks, you can decrease it to your minimum bid of 33 and stop the rules, because obviously otherwise it keeps going up, down, up, down, up, down, nothing happens. So what this does is it covers keywords which don't have any orders and allows you to see at what point what's the bid price that you would need to pay to get a click and then get an order. And then the next 2 points is once you get that click, you then get an ACOS, and then if your ACOS is above or below your target ACOS, which is again a metric that you put in there, it will then adjust proportionally or whatever you've chosen to do so that you maximize your return on investment on that keyword. So another quick example, and it's the same thing except at a certain point. So in this case, if your conversion rate is above 30% after 30 clicks, but again, you can do 50 clicks, 10 clicks, whatever you want, you would move the keyword to a phrase match campaign so that you can start finding new keywords, but you would only do that on the keywords which are converting really highly, because you already know that people who type these keywords are buying your product, so these are the most likely keywords to continue to convert well. You can, of course, these are just 2 examples, there's plenty of other setups like this in the software, and you can use it with an automatic campaign to then move it to broad phrase match. Everything you want can be done in there. And then just quickly to finish on, so these are some of the metrics you can use. So you can use in the KPIs, so things like your ACOS, your orders, your impressions, your clicks, the click-through rates, the average cost per click, revenue, all of these different things. And then your equation, so is it greater, lower, less than, equal, the value, so absolute value or percentage. This is how you would set the things, because one of the key differentiators for Trendle is that we've set it up so that it's fully flexible. So we have a few templates and what we discussed that we suggest and how you should do it. But what this allows you to do, if you're really advanced and you really want to, you can go and actually customize your own campaign fully, completely. So I think this would answer, Nathan, what your question was, where you would be able to set it up to exactly how you want, and then you just replicate it on other campaigns. So just a couple of things to finish on. If you are interested by trying out Trendle, we have a 2-month free trial, extra month free if you use KÖLN-Baramp as a coupon, and that expires on the 30th of November. And also, if you like the presentation and if you want to hear more from me, which you probably don't, we have a Facebook group where we have weekly webinars, so feel free to like us on Facebook if you have any interest in that. Okay? Does anyone have any questions?
How much it costs after
there's different. At the moment, there's 2 plans. We're actually going to add a 3rd one. The lowest plan is $50. The higher plan is $250. But
per month or
per month. But for that $50, you get all of the 8 applications, and then what you have is at the moment the ads automation is only in the 250, but that's a mistake. So we're correcting that. And so what you will have is you will have the ads automation in the 50. It's going to be 100 or 150, the middle plan. We haven't finalized that yet. And then in the 250, and then it will be based on how much you actually use. So if you spend a lot on ads, you'll pay more. If you don't spend a lot, you'll be in the $50 plan. What we're trying to do is make it very simple as a pricing structure, so that because you can always change a lot of other things. And as I said, you get all of the other things. There's just the keywords where you get a certain amount of keywords, and then you have to buy more if you want to rank on more keywords. But again, unless you're at that size of business, it's not a big cost. So we've tried to keep it relatively cheap, so that even new sellers. And if you're a new seller, there is a package which I think is $10 a month, which covers you your first 1,000 orders, so that you can just start out, because obviously you don't want to start spending money before you're making money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
does Trendle work with existing campaigns? Can I use my own campaigns and optimize it with Trendle, or does it build on scratch?
So yeah, you can use exactly what you have already. So it's literally plug and play. If you already have your stuff, you just sign into the thing, you connect your APIs like you would do with any other software. Do you use other softwares?
Yes, at the moment I try Kasam. Sorry for this.
No, it's fine. No, but it's absolutely. The thing is,
but I'm not very.
Yeah. So what you would do? The reason I asked that question is not to see if you were cheating on me or not. No, it's more to do if you're familiar with the process of connecting an app within Sales Central.
Yes.
So once you've done that once, you know how to do it. And so all you would have to do is connect your APIs into our software, and then you would select the campaign you want us to manage. And that's all you do. So there's no problem with using current campaigns. There may be a slight issue, and I'd have to double check, if you then wanted to move keywords around, but I don't think it's a problem, but just the only slight caveat I think potentially could be an issue, but I don't think it would be. Okay.
The second question, does the Trendle software, after the starting process, optimize and add keywords in a continuous way? So
this is what I was explaining before. So a lot of strategies involve starting with automatic or broad, and what you've got to, it's very important to understand that automatic and broad is basically about, so automatic, broad, and phrase is about keyword harvesting and finding new keywords. But specifically, the real important differentiator and what affects your profit is that automatic and broad campaigns is basically one word. So as I said, if you have toilet brush, it will take any of the two words. And so that creates a lot of junk. But if you have, I don't know, red toilet brush, which is relevant to your keyword, that will be picked up in a phrase match. And that's why I only suggest using phrase and exact matches for that reason. So in terms of the flow charts we showed, if I go back, I kind of went a bit too quick also. Sorry. So if I show this one, and as I said, the two I've shown is two examples. We have, I think, 5 or 6 preset filters, and then you can do your own if you want. But you see here, you would start with an exact match, and then this rule here, if your conversion rate is over 30%, over 30 clicks, but you can change that. That can be after 10 orders, that can be after whatever you want. Then you copy the keyword to the phrase ad group. So you move it to a new ad group. We always suggest to have a different ad group based on your match type. You can leave it in the same ad group if you want, but it just makes it cleaner for you to operate, especially when you're scaling these things up. So once you go into that phrase ad group, you can then, and we also say always make it as a negative exact in the phrase ad group. I don't know if you're aware of that. How many people here are actually aware of the negatives and how that impacts it? Okay. So if you're trying to find a new keyword and you already have that keyword, always make the keyword you already know negative exact in the other place.
Noch 15 Minuten, 15 more minutes.
Ah, so I didn't understand what was going on at the start, so I didn't know. But so if you have that initial keyword, you already know it. So make it a negative exact in the phrase broad automatic, because you don't need to discover it again. You don't need to pay Amazon to discover that keyword. And on top of that, it allows you to make sure you're controlling the bid in that ad group where you have it. But so this is where, in terms of discovering new keywords, what you would set up here, you would set it up, like that if you want. And so what would happen is, once the keyword reaches that particular milestone, so 30% conversion after 30 clicks, so it wait 30 clicks, hits 30 clicks, is a conversion above 30% or not, then it would move it into the phrase ad group, and so that's where it would start running and discovering new keywords. And then in this ad group, you would set up the rules in the same way. So in this example, we've set it as the same as the exact campaign. So the rules which would work are these rules here, again, that we've talked about before. So if no clicks after 5 days, it increases. So these are the these 3 rules are basically created to discover what's the price point at which you're going to get a click, you're going to get an order. But obviously you don't want to do that and continually waste budget. So, and then these 2 rules, once you get an order, are judged to do your profitability. So this is where you would find new keywords, and this is where it would control how profitable it is. And then again, if I come back to here, this rule that we set up here is over 30% after 20 clicks, but again, you can change those numbers, then it would move it back into the exact ad group because you've discovered that keyword. Does that make sense or not?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Anyone else have any questions?
Are you planning to implement the reverse async?
No, we have no plans to do reverse. Listen, the reason...
Sounds so cool if that would be automated too. I mean,
what do you mean by, just to clarify, by...
So it's suggestions on reverse async. You say, those are my competitors, monitor them all the time, and then if they pop up, implement them into my exact campaigns all the time. That's such a strategy. And I don't know anyone that did an automation.
It's a good idea. Listen, I think the problem for us in doing that is you'd have to have a basic initial reverse async engine. And then the problem you have is, so running a reverse async requires a lot of power in terms of you have to keep scraping to find out where the things are. And that's why we don't do it. And that's why the people who give away for free do a really bad job, because they can't afford to go to the depth. And that's why I always recommend pay $10 for it. It might seem a lot, $10, $15 for one file, but 2,000 keywords, you can, in most cases, pop it in. If the competition isn't that high, you will just get sales because you have the keywords. And coming back to what I said at the start, if your offer is better, or if you're offering a worse product for the same price or for a higher price than your competitor, your ads aren't going to change anything. Do you know what I mean? So if your offer stands up against the person you're going against, and you add the same keywords as he has, then you will make sales because a competitor is going to come and see and prefer your listing. Does anyone else have any more questions?
How often do you check the reverse asyncs? How often do you guys check that? What do your competitors do?
I actually, to be honest with you, so I don't. So personally, as a seller, I don't check that. The reason I don't check it at all is I'm starting off with a file of 2,000 keywords, okay, or 3,000 keywords.
All in one campaign or separate?
So in terms of campaign setup, I would recommend not having more than, so Amazon allows you up to 1,000 keywords per ad group. I would never put more than 50. 50 to 100 is a good number. The reason for that is Amazon kind of skips a lot of keywords. So if you put a huge mass, you can try it out if you want. Just put 1,000 keywords in that campaign. You'll see maybe the first 50 or 100 will get clicks, and the rest or impressions, and the rest will just sit there. Because Amazon doesn't actually go, because if you imagine if Amazon had to go through every single keyword all the time, it would cost them too much money in terms of running that. So,
and if you split it, it would be better performance?
So 20 campaigns, each 100 keywords for one async.
Ad groups.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what, and it's a pain, and this is coming back to what Nathan was saying before, this is the one painful part, is creating the ad campaigns. You can either do it manually, or you can do it, using the Excel sheets. But the problem with the Excel sheets is you've got to build it, so it's a waste of time, in my opinion. But in terms, I don't know. Just on a side note, I don't do it myself manually. So all my staff on my business, on the seller businesses, are in the Philippines. So I'm paying someone to do that kind of stuff for me for $150, $200 a month. I don't know if any of you outsource your staff, but that's a whole different conversation. But so things like that is why you outsource it, because it's a manually intensive job, but you have to go through it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just like a little bit more detailed question. You are, like in your rule suggestions, you are usually working with clicks as your main KPI. I think so.
So these are examples that we've set.
But like you're suggesting to work with clicks, right?
So no, so what we have here, what you've got to differentiate the two things. So we've put clicks here because that's what we generally work with. The critical point is there's two scenarios. There's a keyword which doesn't have an order, in which case you can't, ultimately everything comes down to the ACOS. But if you don't have an order, you don't have an ACOS. So you have to put something in, because this is usually the area where you lose the most money in an ad campaign. There's a keyword which hasn't had an order and just sits there getting clicks and clicks and clicks and clicks, and suddenly you wake up, it's got 25 clicks, and then you realize it's irrelevant to your product. So that's the area where you can make sure you use our money. In terms of the rest, we use clicks because ultimately that's a human decision. What that means is 5 humans have chosen to click on your product. They've gone through what I showed you at the start, that image where there was 4 products. They've looked at those, They've decided they want more information about your product. They've decided that. And then once they've got to that stage, they've decided to buy or not. And so that's, for us, the most important metric. What do you use, or what would you suggest?
We're usually using total spend. Because for me it depends, like if you have 5 clicks equaling like 10 cents CPC, or you have like 5 clicks that have like €1 CPC, like depending on how competitive the keyword is, it's like a completely different metric for me. So I can have like 5 people clicking on like a non-competitive keyword at all, and so I can scale that up to 25 clicks before I have to like adjust my.
So the reason I would use the clicks is what we're trying to do here. As I said, we're trying to kind of put a safeguard in place of what happens if if you don't get any orders, and so that's kind of a safeguard. Then the reason we use clicks here and not total spend, the total spend will be reflected in the ACOS, because ultimately, if you have 20 clicks at 10 cents, it's €2. Your product selling for €10, that's a 20%. If you have 5 clicks at €1, that's €5. You're selling for 10. That's 50%. Do you see what I mean? So that's why we use that. I'd be interested to find out more, maybe not now or later, but why you decided that that's better than the ACOS. But anyway,
I have to think about it.
I'm actually generally interested because it's something that we've never thought about using that precisely because of in our opinion, it's included in the ACOS. But I'm interested to find out why.
So I mean, even if you have like 0 orders, like
this is the point. This is why you have what you said is exactly. So I now understand why you're doing it. You're doing that to make sure that if you get 20 clicks cheaply, if your click is really cheap, you can give it 20 clicks before you make a decision. So okay. And this is why we have this set of rules in there. And you could say rather than zero clicks, you could say after $5.
Yeah, like if you have a margin.
Yeah.
So if you're like even, then you can like adjust. Or
all of these numbers, both the numbers and clicks, orders, days, whatever, they're fully customizable. So you can change that to exactly what you would do. So you can say I want to spend $5 before I make a decision. I want to spend $2 before I make a decision, and then you factor in the decision you want to make. So that's perfectly fine. So now I understand why you're doing that.
Yeah, so I was just asking because you like suggested clicks, and I was like.
So the reason we've set it as clicks is, from my point of view, our point of view, it's a real human. Does that make it's a tangible asset? But I understand completely why you want to use budget, and it makes complete sense. So I wouldn't discourage it at all. Anyone else have any questions? No. Anyone asleep?
Wake up.
Yeah. No, it's good. Okay. Well, I'm around all day, so if you have any other questions about any of the other applications that we have on Trendle, I lived in China a long time, so if you have any issues with China, stuff like that, don't hesitate to come and ask me. I'm here to help you. So, and like our Facebook page. if you didn't fall asleep now, then I'll send you to sleep next week. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.